The moment my mother said, "It's probably better if you don't sit up front," I knew I was no longer considered family. She said it quietly, almost kindly, standing in the lobby of the Riverwalk Civic Center in San Antonio, Texas, while people in pressed suits and cocktail dresses streamed past us. Her name is Margaret Holloway. She's my mother. And she didn't look at me when she said it. If you've ever felt your place in a family disappear in real time, stay with me. Like the video, leave a comment about where you're listening from, and subscribe if stories about family drama, betrayal, and revenge hit close to home. This isn't a rant, it's a confession. And it started right there, 30 minutes before the ceremony began. I'm Lena Holloway. I was 29 years old that night. I'm a licensed nail technician. I work 6 days a week at a mid-range salon on Blanco Road. I make between $60,000 and $80,000 a year, depending on tips, seasons, and how badly my wrists hurt. I pay my own rent. I don't ask my parents for money. I never have. None of that mattered, because that night wasn't about me. It was about my sister. My older sister, Claire Holloway Whitman. Claire is 34. She's a senior project manager at a commercial real estate firm downtown. She married into money. Her husband, Daniel Whitman, comes from a family that owns half a shopping district outside Austin. The event we were attending wasn't a wedding or a funeral. It was a public recognition ceremony. Claire was being named Young Professional of the Year by the City Chamber. There were sponsors, a photographer, a printed program with names spelled correctly. Mine wasn't in it. I noticed that before my mom spoke to me. I stood there holding a small gift bag, watching my father, Thomas Holloway, shake hands with people he didn't know. He looked proud in a way I'd never seen when he talked about me. My Aunt Susan Holloway was already seated in the second row, whispering to a woman in pearls and glancing at me like I was staff who wandered too close. That's when my mom leaned in. "Lena," she said, touching my elbow, "it's probably better if you don't sit up front. There are donors and optics." Optics. That word stayed with me. I nodded. I always nod. I stepped back, moved toward the aisle seats near the exit, where no one would need to look at me for long. That's when I realized something small but sharp. My name tag was missing. Everyone else had one. Claire's was embossed, clipped neatly to her blazer. Mine hadn't been forgotten. It had been omitted. That should have been enough of a warning. Growing up, I learned early that my hands were never going to impress my parents. Claire was good with words and plans and resumes. I was good with people, with details, with making someone feel taken care of for an hour. My grandmother, Eleanor Holloway, used to say my hands were steady. She meant it as a compliment. My parents heard it as a limitation. When I decided to go to cosmetology school at 20, my mother cried like I told her I was moving overseas. My father said, "You're better than that." Claire didn't say anything. She just smiled the way she always did when she was winning without trying. I paid for my training myself. $21,000. Took me 3 years to pay off. By 25, I had a full client book. By 27, I was mentoring 2 new techs. I built something real with my hands. At home, I was still just a nail girl. The ceremony started. Applause filled the room. Claire walked on stage, confident, polished, glowing under lights that made her look taller than she was. She thanked her husband. She thanked her mentors. She thanked my parents by name. She didn't thank me. I didn't expect her to. But when she said, "My family has always believed in excellence," and the audience laughed softly, something in my chest went cold. Halfway through her speech, I felt my phone vibrate. A text from my cousin Rachel Holloway. "Did you know they announced the trust tonight?" I stared at the screen. "What trust?" 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then another message. "Grandma Eleanor's. Dad and Mom finalized it last week. Claire's name is all over it." My grandmother Eleanor died 2 years ago. She left behind a small but clean estate. A paid-off house, savings, some investments, nothing flashy. She used to tell me she wanted things divided fairly. Apparently, that definition had changed. I looked up at the stage just as Claire smiled and said, "This honor belongs to my family." The room clapped. My parents stood. I stayed seated. Because in that moment, I understood something that took me almost 3 decades to see clearly. This wasn't about success. It was about permission, and I had never been given any. The ceremony ended. People stood, talked, congratulated. My mother hugged Claire. My father shook hands. No one came toward me. I slipped out through the side doors, past the donor banners and floral arrangements. Outside, the air was warm. My hands were steady. I didn't cry. I opened my car, sat inside, and read Rachel's messages again. The trust, finalized. My name missing. That was the moment the small injustice became something else. Not a feeling, a fact. And facts, once seen, don't go away. I drove home knowing one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever they thought I was worth, they had just underestimated how carefully I pay attention. I didn't confront anyone that night. That's important. People like to imagine explosions, tears, public scenes. I went home, took off my shoes, washed the smell of polish remover and cheap champagne off my hands, and went to bed like it was a normal Tuesday. Because I'd learned something early in my family. If you react too fast, they decide the story for you. The next morning, I was back at the salon by 8:45 a.m., unlocking the front door of Bellissima Nails before the owner arrived. The shop is on Blanco Road, between a dentist's office and a dry cleaner. Fluorescent lights, 8 manicure stations, 6 pedicure chairs that never stop humming. I've worked there for 6 years. By 9 o'clock, my first client was already waiting. Her name is Monica Perez. She's 52, a real estate agent, comes every 3 weeks like clockwork. I've done her nails long enough to know when her marriage is tense by how short she wants them. "You look tired," she said, as I sat down across from her. "I was out late," I said. She nodded like she understood. She always does. That's the thing about being a nail tech. People talk when your hands are on theirs. They talk because they think you're not listening, or because they think you won't judge, or because they know you can't interrupt. I listened all morning. By noon, I had heard about 2 divorces, 1 secret promotion, and a daughter who hadn't called in 3 months. None of it surprised me. At 12:17 p.m., my phone buzzed in my apron pocket. A text from my father, Thomas Holloway. "Proud of your sister last night. Hope you understand." That was it. No mention of me leaving early. No question about whether I got home safe. No explanation about the trust. "Just hope you understand." I didn't reply. At 2:40 p.m., my mother called. I let it ring while I finished shaping acrylics for a walk-in. She left a voicemail. "Lena, we didn't mean for you to feel uncomfortable. You know how these things are. Claire's moment was important." Important. Another word that stayed. I called my cousin Rachel Holloway that night. She lives in Houston. She's blunt in a way no one else in my family dares to be. "They didn't tell you?" she asked. "No," I said. She sighed. "Okay. So Grandma Eleanor updated the trust 6 months before she died. But Mom and Dad were listed as co-trustees. They finalized distribution last week." "And?" I said. "And you get a one-time payout," Rachel said. $45,000. I did the math in my head. Eleanor's house alone sold for $400,000. "And Claire?" I asked. Rachel didn't answer right away. "She gets the house equity, the investment account, and future control," she said finally. Future control. That phrase echoed the same way optics had. "Did Grandma want that?" I asked. Rachel hesitated. "Grandma wanted things fair. But she also trusted your parents to decide." I hung up after that. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a calculator and my bank statement spread out in front of me. $45,000 would cover half my student loans. It would give me a buffer. It would look generous on paper. It would also erase me from the rest of the picture. I thought about every holiday where Claire was praised for her promotions, while I was asked if my back hurt. Every time my mother told her friends, "I was great with my hands like," that was the end of the sentence. Every time my father said, "At least she's working," when someone asked what I did. They didn't see my client list, my repeat bookings, my waiting list, my cash flow. They saw hierarchy, and they had just codified it. 3 days later, my parents invited me to dinner. Their house is in Stone Oak. Gated community, neutral colors, everything paid off. I hadn't lived there since I was 19, but they still talked to me like I might move back any day if I failed hard enough. Claire and her husband, Daniel Whitman, were already there when I arrived. Daniel shook my hand like he was meeting a coworker. Claire hugged me lightly, careful not to smudge her lipstick. "We heard you left early," my mother Margaret said, pouring wine. "I had work," I said. Claire smiled. "Of course you did." Dinner went on like nothing had happened. They talked about sponsorships, networking, a possible move to Austin. Daniel mentioned a property deal. My father nodded along like he understood. At dessert, my mother cleared her throat. "We wanted to talk about Grandma Eleanor's estate," she said. I looked up. "We made decisions we felt were responsible," my father added. "Claire has more long-term obligations." I waited. "You're getting a lump sum," my mother said. "It's generous, and it gives you freedom." Freedom. There it was again. Another word they used like a consolation prize. "So I'm out," I said. Claire's fork paused mid-air. "Lena," she said softly, "it's not like that." "How is it like?" I asked. Silence. Daniel looked at his plate. My father sighed. "You're independent. You always have been." I nodded slowly. That night, something inside me shifted. Not anger, not sadness, clarity. I realized they weren't trying to hurt me. They were trying to place me, and they had already decided where I belonged. I drove home without raising my voice, without demanding anything, because I'd spent my entire adult life being underestimated by people who thought quiet meant weak. They had no idea what I've been learning all these years while they weren't looking. How contracts work, how money moves, how silence can be leverage, and how patience, when paired with timing, becomes power. I didn't know yet exactly what I was going to do, but I knew this. They had closed a door, and that meant I was finally free to open a different one. The check arrived on a Thursday. Certified mail, signature required, thick envelope. My full name typed neatly on the front, like proof that I still existed. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on my kitchen counter while I made coffee, packed my lunch, and checked my appointment schedule for the day. 12 clients. 3 fills, 2 full sets, 1 bridal trial. A normal, exhausting Friday. I carried the envelope with me to work and slid it into my locker at Bellissima Nails, unopened. Something about the weight of it made my stomach tighten. Not because I needed the money, because of what accepting it would mean. At 10:30 a.m., while I was soaking off gel polish for a client named Denise Walker, my phone buzzed again. A text from my sister, Claire Holloway Whitman. "I hope you're okay. Mom says you've been quiet." Quiet. I typed back slowly. "I'm fine, just busy." She responded almost immediately. "We should talk. I don't want money to come between us." I stared at that sentence longer than I should have. Money didn't come between us. It was already there. It always had been. I didn't reply. At noon, I took my lunch break in the back room, sitting on a folding chair with my sandwich untouched. I finally opened the envelope. The check was for exactly $45,000. No cents. No explanation letter. Just a printed note at the bottom. Estate distribution. Eleanor Holloway Trust. My hands didn't shake. What surprised me was how clean it all felt. Efficient. Final. Like I'd been laid off from a family business I was never officially part of. I folded the check back into the envelope and locked it in my locker again. That afternoon, something else happened. Something small. Something that would have gone unnoticed if I hadn't already been paying attention. My salon manager, Rosa Martinez, called me into her office. Rosa is in her 40s. Sharp eyes. No patience for nonsense. She built Bellissima Nails from 2 chairs into a fully booked shop. She knows numbers better than most accountants. "I got a call," she said. "From who?" I asked. "A woman named Margaret Holloway," she said. "Your mother." My jaw tightened slightly. What did she want? Rosa crossed her arms. "She asked about your schedule, your income, whether you were planning to stay long-term." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "What did you tell her?" I asked. Rosa raised an eyebrow. "I told her it wasn't her business." I exhaled. "She hinted," Rosa continued, "that you might be moving on soon, that you were receiving money." There it was. They weren't just placing me. They were managing me. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. Rosa nodded. "Good, because you bring in more repeat clients than anyone else here." She slid a folder across the desk. "I was going to wait until next quarter," she said. But since your family seems to think you're disposable, I'll say it now. I want you to take over training. Lead tech, pay bump, commission on new hires." The number she named was precise. 85,000 a year minimum, more if business stayed steady. I sat very still. "Why?" I asked. "Because you're reliable," Rosa said, "and because clients ask for you by name." That night, I drove home with a strange mix of emotions. Not triumph, not relief, validation, from someone who had nothing to gain by flattering me. When I got home, my mother called again. I answered this time. "Did you get it?" Margaret asked. "Yes," I said. "It's generous," she said quickly. "We thought it would help you feel secure." Secure. Another word. "I haven't deposited it," I said. Silence. "Why not?" she asked. "Because I want to understand the conditions," I replied. "There are no conditions," she said too fast. I leaned against my kitchen counter. "Then why did you call my boss?" Another silence. Longer this time. "We just want what's best for you," she said finally. "No," I said calmly. "You want what's convenient." Her breath caught. "That's not fair." "I'll deposit the check," I continued, "when I decide what it means. Until then, don't interfere with my work again." Her voice sharpened. "You're being dramatic." I smiled slightly, though she couldn't see it. "I'm being precise." We hung up. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not from anxiety, from calculation. I started pulling records, old emails, texts, conversations I'd brushed off before, patterns I'd ignored, because naming them would have forced action. I remembered my grandmother Eleanor's hands, the way she used to watch me work, quiet and observant. The way she once said, "People underestimate skilled labor because they don't know how much trust it takes." I opened my laptop and searched Texas trust law. Co-trustee responsibilities, disclosure requirements, beneficiary rights. I wasn't a lawyer, but I knew how systems worked. And I knew one thing for certain. My parents had decided my future without my consent. They thought the check would close the matter. What they didn't realize was that accepting money didn't mean accepting silence. It meant I now had standing. And once you have standing, you have options. I placed the envelope back on the counter, untouched. Outside, the city hummed like it always did. Cars passing, lights changing, people living their lives without knowing what was shifting quietly inside one woman who'd spent too long being told where she belonged. I wasn't angry. I was awake, and that was far more dangerous. I deposited the check on Monday morning, not because I'd changed my mind, because I needed the paper trail. I went to my credit union on North Loop 1604, stood in line behind a man arguing about overdraft fees, and slid the check across the counter without ceremony. The teller smiled, wished me a nice day, and handed me a receipt that made everything real. $45,000, cleared in 2 business days. I didn't touch a cent of it. I moved it into a separate account the moment it posted. No transfers, no spending. Just proof that the money existed and that I hadn't rejected it. Standing. That word had weight now. At the salon, nothing changed on the surface. I trained 2 new hires. I fixed chipped acrylics. I smiled at regulars and remembered birthdays without writing them down. But underneath, I was cataloging everything. The calls, the comments, the pressure. It started subtle. My mother, Margaret, asked, casually, whether I'd thought about opening my own place. My father, Thomas, suggested I take time off and reassess while I had money. Claire sent a text about a friend who needed a private nail tech for events, something flexible. Flexible was their word for temporary. Disposable. On Wednesday night, Claire invited me for coffee. Neutral territory, a place near the rim with white walls and overpriced pastries. She was already seated when I arrived, phone face down, smile practiced. "I don't want this to be weird," she said. "It already is," I replied, sitting down. She sighed. "You're reading too much into things." "I'm reading exactly what's happening," I said. She leaned forward. "Mom and Dad are worried. They think you're holding on to resentment." I stirred my coffee slowly. "They called my boss." Claire's smile slipped for half a second. "They're just trying to help." "No," I said. "They're trying to manage fallout." Her jaw tightened. "You always assume the worst." "I assume patterns," I replied. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me. "Let's be honest," she said. You don't need the trust the way I do. There it was. Explain, I said. She hesitated, then spoke faster. I have a mortgage. Daniel's family expects things. There's a lifestyle component. And I don't? I asked. She waved a hand. You're good with money. You live simply. I smiled. That's not simplicity. That's discipline. She flushed. You chose a different path. I chose a path you all treated as temporary, I said. The conversation ended politely. That was the worst part. No raised voices, no apologies. Just distance, formalized. That night, I got an email from a law firm I'd never contacted. Subject line, estate clarification. The sender was Mark Ellison, attorney at Ellison & Gray, LLP, downtown San Antonio. He represented my parents. The email was brief, polite, chilling. We understand you've received your distribution. Please confirm receipt so we may close the file. Close the file. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the email to a different address. Angela Brooks, Esquire. Angela Brooks is a trust and probate attorney I found through a client referral. One of my regulars, Janine Foster, is a paralegal. She watches everything. When I asked her casually who she'd call if a trust felt off, she didn't hesitate. Angela met me 2 days later, in her office near the courthouse. She was in her late 30s, no nonsense, sharp eyes. She read without interrupting. Your parents are co-trustees, she said finally. They have fiduciary duties. What kind? I asked. Disclosure, she said. Fair dealing. No self-interest. No manipulation. They finalized everything without telling me, I said. She nodded. That's a problem. What about the payout? I asked. You accepting it doesn't waive your rights, she said. Especially if there's evidence of pressure or unequal treatment. I exhaled slowly. Angela leaned back. Why now? I thought about it. Because they're escalating, I said. They tried to interfere with my job. Her eyes sharpened. That's leverage. She opened a folder. Your grandmother Eleanor's trust document mentions intent. Equal respect. No favoritism unless clearly stated. Is it clearly stated? I asked. Angela shook her head. No. She looked at me carefully. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Okay. Do you want more money? She said. Or do you want control? I didn't answer right away. I want the truth, I said. Documented. Angela smiled slightly. That's usually the most expensive option. Good, I said. I can afford patience. The first formal letter went out that Friday. Request for full accounting. Disclosure of trustee communications. Clarification of decision-making process. It was calm, professional, impossible to ignore. My mother called within an hour. This is unnecessary, she said, voice tight. I disagree, I said. You're turning this into a legal issue, she snapped. You made it one when you excluded me, I replied. Thomas took the phone. You're being influenced. I smiled. No, I'm finally informed. There was silence on the line. That night, I sat alone in my apartment. Lights low, phone face down. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt exposed. Once you name what's happening, you can't pretend anymore. On Saturday morning, Rosa stopped me before my first client. Everything okay? She asked. Yes, I said. She nodded. Good, because I got another call. Same woman, same questions. My chest tightened. She won't get through again, Rosa added. But you should know. I thanked her and walked to my station, hands steady, spine straight. They weren't just underestimating me anymore. They were trying to contain me. And containment only works if the person being boxed in doesn't realize the walls are there. I realized something else that morning. They were scared, not of losing money, of losing narrative. Because once the story changed, so did the balance of power. And I was done letting them tell it without me. The accounting arrived in pieces, not all at once, not cleanly, not honestly. Angela Brooks warned me this would happen. When people know they're being watched, she said, they stall. They drip feed information. They hope you'll get tired. I didn't. The first packet came by certified mail on a Tuesday. Copies of bank statements, redacted emails, a summary letter written in careful language that said a lot without explaining much. I read it at my kitchen table after work, wrists aching, feet sore, polish still clinging to the edges of my nails. I noticed the gaps immediately. Dates that jumped months, transfers labeled administrative, Decisions made by consensus, without showing who was present. I highlighted everything and scanned it to Angela. Her reply came 20 minutes later. This is incomplete, and that's intentional. 2 days later, the second packet arrived. More documents, more gaps. Still no explanation for why Claire Holloway Whitman had been given controlling interest over assets that produced ongoing income, while I'd been given a one-time payout. That distinction mattered. Angela called me that evening. They're treating you like a liability, not a beneficiary, she said. Which means they don't want you asking questions. Too late, I said. She paused. There's something else. What? Your sister signed off on part of this, she said. As an advisor, not a trustee. But her input is documented. The room felt very quiet. So she knew, I said. Yes, Angela said. And she participated. I sat back in my chair and stared at the wall. This was the part people don't understand about betrayal. It's not the act, it's the confirmation. The moment when doubt disappears and reality settles in without apology. Claire hadn't just benefited, she'd helped design it. That night, I dreamed of hands. Mine, moving steadily. Hers, gesturing, directing, pointing away from me. When I woke up, I wasn't angry. I was focused. The next escalation didn't come from my parents. It came from my salon. Rosa called an all-staff meeting before opening on Friday morning. Everyone stood around awkwardly with coffee cups, half awake. I want to be transparent, Rosa said. Someone contacted the state licensing board with concerns about sanitation. The room stiffened. My stomach dropped. They didn't name anyone, Rosa continued. But they referenced this location. I felt heat rise up my neck. I know who did it, I said quietly. Rosa looked at me. Do you have reason to believe that? Yes, I said. My mother has already contacted this business twice, trying to influence my employment. The room went silent. Rosa didn't hesitate. Okay, then here's what we're going to do. She turned to the staff. Everyone follow protocol. Double-check logs. This will blow over. Then she looked at me. And you're not alone in this. I nodded, swallowing hard. That afternoon, an inspector came. Calm, professional, checked stations, reviewed records, asked questions. We passed. No citation, no warning. But the message had been sent. At dinner that night, my phone rang. Claire. I let it ring. Then I answered. Why are you doing this? She asked immediately. Doing what? I said. Dragging mom and dad into legal nonsense, she said. Calling lawyers. Creating stress. I leaned against my counter. You mean responding to being excluded? You weren't excluded, she snapped. You got money. You got power, I said. That's not fair, she said. No, I replied. It's accurate. She went quiet. You think this makes you strong, she said finally. But it just makes you difficult. I smiled slightly. Difficult to control? Her breath caught. You always play the victim. I'm not playing anything, I said. I'm documenting. She scoffed. You're going to blow up the family over this? I thought about the call to the licensing board, the calls to my boss, the silence, the paperwork. No, I said. You already did. I'm just not cleaning it up for you. She hung up. On Sunday, my Aunt Susan Holloway showed up at my apartment unannounced. I hadn't given her the address. Someone had. She stood in my doorway, arms crossed, lips pursed. This is getting out of hand, she said. I didn't invite her in. You've embarrassed your parents, she continued. People are talking. I'm sure they are, I said. Susan leaned closer. You need to stop before you ruin your reputation. I looked at her calmly. My reputation with who? She blinked. With family, she said. I nodded slowly. That assumes they've protected it. She left without another word. The third packet arrived the following week. This one was worse. Emails between my parents discussing timing. Language about keeping Lena independent. Notes about avoiding long-term entanglements. Angela called me as soon as she saw it. This crosses a line, she said. They're making decisions based on control, not intent. What happens now? I asked. We can petition the court, she said. Force a review. Possibly remove them as trustees. I closed my eyes. What about Claire? I asked. Angela hesitated. Her involvement complicates things. Good, I said. Because for the first time, the imbalance I'd lived with my entire life was visible on paper. Not opinions, not feelings, evidence. I didn't feel victorious. I felt calm. The kind of calm that comes when you stop wondering if you're imagining things. When the gaslighting ends. On Thursday, Rosa pulled me aside again. "Whatever you're dealing with," she said, "it's heavy. If you need flexibility, tell me." "I'm okay," I said. She studied me. "You don't look fragile." "I'm not," I said. That night, I sat at my kitchen table again, reviewing documents, making notes, drinking cold tea. My hands were steady, as always. I realized something then. They thought my work made me small. They didn't understand that doing the same precise thing over and over teaches you patience, teaches you discipline, teaches you when to wait and when to move. They taught me how to be underestimated. They taught me how to endure. What they never expected was that I'd learn how to act. And the moment I did, the balance shifted. Because the truth doesn't need volume. It needs timing. And mine was getting very good. The petition was filed on a Monday morning at 9:14 a.m. Angela Brooks didn't dramatize it when she called. She never did. "We've requested a formal review of trustee conduct," she said. The court accepted it. "Your parents have been served." I was sitting in my car outside Bellissima Nails, engine off, hands resting on the steering wheel. Clients were already lining up outside the glass door. Mondays were always full. "Okay," I said. "That's it?" Angela asked. "That's it," I replied. I went inside and unlocked the door like every other day. If my parents expected me to panic, to beg, to reconsider, they misunderstood me completely. I had spent years building muscle memory for calm under pressure. You don't last in my line of work without it. You learn how to stay steady while people flinch, twitch, complain, cry, overshare. By 11 a.m., my mother Margaret had left 3 voicemails. The first was controlled. The second was angry. The third was quiet and shaking. "You've gone too far," she said. "This is family." I deleted all 3 without responding. At 1:22 p.m., my father Thomas sent a text. "This is unnecessary. You're being manipulated." I stared at the screen, then typed back one sentence. "I'm being represented." No response. That afternoon, the salon was busier than usual. A bachelorette party walked in without an appointment. Rosa squeezed them in. Champagne was poured into paper cups. Laughter echoed down the row of stations. I focused on my work. There's a point during a manicure where everything else disappears. The rhythm, the pressure, the focus. I've always liked that part best. It's where my mind settles. At 4:10 p.m., Rosa came over quietly. "There's a woman here asking for you," she said. Didn't give a name. My stomach tightened. "I'll handle it," I said. I walked to the front. My Aunt Susan Holloway stood there, lips tight, purse clutched like armor. "This is not the place," I said. "You forced our hand," she hissed. "Your parents are humiliated." I lowered my voice. "You're in my workplace." She glanced around, realizing people were watching. "You think you're clever," she said, "but you don't understand what you're risking." "I understand exactly what I'm risking," I replied, and I accepted it. She stepped closer. "You're a nail tech. Don't forget that." I met her eyes. I never do. Rosa appeared beside me. "Ma'am, you need to leave." Susan hesitated, then turned sharply and walked out. Rosa looked at me. "You okay?" "Yes," I said, and I was. The retaliation didn't stop there. 2 days later, Daniel Whitman emailed me. Subject line: family concerns. Daniel rarely contacted me directly. He preferred intermediaries. "This is getting out of hand. Claire is under a lot of stress. We all are. I'd like to talk, man to man." I didn't reply. That night, Claire showed up at my apartment. She stood in the hallway, arms crossed, eyes red, jaw tight. "You filed something," she said. "Yes," I replied. "You're trying to take Mom and Dad to court," she said. "I'm asking the court to review their conduct," I corrected. She laughed, sharp and humorless. "You sound just like a lawyer now." I tilted my head. "You sound like someone who didn't think consequences would apply to her." Her face flushed. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You advised," I said. "You benefited." She shook her head. "I needed stability." "And I needed transparency," I replied. Her voice dropped. "If this goes forward, they could lose control of everything." I nodded. "Yes." She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "You're serious," she said. "I've always been serious," I replied. You just never noticed. She stepped back. You'll destroy Mom. I didn't raise my voice. She made choices. Claire's breath came fast. You don't even care. I looked at her. Really looked. I care about the truth, I said. And I care about not being managed like a problem. She left without another word. 3 days later, Angela called again. They've retained counsel, she said. Aggressive. I expected that, I replied. They're arguing that you accepted payment and therefore consented, she continued. And that argument won't hold, she said, especially given the interference with your employment. I smiled slightly. Good, I said. That evening, the licensing board closed their inquiry. No violations. No follow-up. The attempt to intimidate me had failed, but the message was clear. They weren't going to stop. The court scheduled the preliminary hearing for 4 weeks out. Plenty of time for pressure. Plenty of time for mistakes. In the meantime, something unexpected happened. Clients started tipping more, not because they knew what was going on, because I was calmer, more present, less burdened. One client, an older woman named Diane McCall, looked at me as I finished her nails. You've got a steady energy, she said, like someone who finally stopped apologizing. I smiled. Something like that. At home that night, I reviewed the documents again. The emails, the language, the patterns. Keeping Lena independent. Avoiding entanglements. Managing outcomes. They hadn't protected me. They'd contained me. And now, containment was breaking. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't loud. I was methodical. And that scared them far more than anger ever could. Because anger can be dismissed. But evidence stays. And soon it would be read out loud in a room they couldn't control. That was the part they hadn't planned for. That was the part I was ready for. The first hearing notice arrived by email at 6:48 a.m. I was already awake. I'd learned to wake up before my alarm sometime during the second week of this process. Not from fear, from anticipation. My body understood before my mind did that things were moving whether I pushed or not. The hearing was set for mid-November at the Bexar County Probate Court. Judge Maria Alvarez, Courtroom 4B, Tuesday morning. Angela Brooks called me an hour later. Judge Alvarez is thorough, she said. No theatrics. She reads everything. That's good, I said. It is, Angela replied. Unless someone's been careless. I smiled at that. The carelessness surfaced faster than I expected. 3 days later, Claire Holloway Whitman emailed Angela directly. She CC'd me. Subject line. Clarification. I read it once. Then again. Claire claimed she'd never intended to influence the trust distribution. She said her involvement had been informal, advisory, family-based. She emphasized that she trusted our parents completely. She attached screenshots, old texts, out of context. Angela called me immediately. She's trying to distance herself, she said. But this is sloppy. How so? I asked. These messages reference conversations that don't appear in the official accounting, Angela said. She's accidentally proving coordination. That night, my phone buzzed with a text from Claire. I didn't mean to CC you. Please don't take this personally. I stared at the screen. I typed back one sentence. Everything about this is personal. She didn't reply. At the salon, life continued. That was the strangest part. Clients still came in with broken nails and broken marriages. They still trusted me with their hands and their stories. The smell of acetone and hand lotion still clung to my clothes when I got home. But I noticed something new. People were watching me. Not the clients, the staff. Not in a bad way, in a curious way. Like they were recalibrating who I was allowed to be. One afternoon, a newer tech named Jasmine Lee sat next to me during a slow moment. You don't take crap from anyone, she said quietly. I looked at her. I used to. She nodded. Yeah, I can tell. At home, my mother tried a different tactic. Margaret sent a handwritten letter. Not an email, not a call. A letter. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on the counter for 2 days, then finally read it late Sunday night. She wrote about memories, about childhood, about how hard it had been raising 2 very different daughters, about how she worried for me. She didn't mention the trust. She didn't apologize. She ended with, "We've always wanted what's best for you." I folded the letter and put it away. I didn't feel guilty. I felt tired. The second escalation came from an unexpected place. The salon received a request from a luxury hotel downtown, asking for a nail tech to service VIP guests during a corporate retreat. High pay, 3-day contract. Rosa offered it to me immediately. When word got out, my phone rang. Daniel Whitman, I answered this time. You're taking that contract? He asked, without greeting. Yes, I said. It conflicts with a family obligation, he said. I laughed once, quietly. It's work. It's during Thanksgiving week, he said. Claire was hoping. Hoping what? I asked. That I'd sit quietly while everyone pretended nothing happened? Silence. Daniel sighed. You're being inflexible. I'm being employed, I said. He lowered his voice. You're burning bridges. No, I replied. I'm choosing which ones not to cross anymore. He hung up. The forensic review arrived the following Friday. Angela sent it as a secured PDF. I read it slowly, line by line. It was worse than I expected. Undisclosed communications. Strategic timing of asset liquidation. Language indicating intent to prevent long-term involvement from one beneficiary. Me. Angela called as soon as I finished. This is enough, she said. The court will take this seriously. What happens to them? I asked. They could be removed as trustees, she said. Control could be reassigned. And Claire? I asked. Angela hesitated. She may be questioned. I exhaled. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table again. Same spot, same chair, different clarity. I thought about the girl I used to be. The one who nodded. The one who stayed quiet so everyone else could stay comfortable. I thought about my grandmother Eleanor's hands. How she used to sit across from me while I practiced on her, saying nothing, watching everything. She'd known. Somewhere inside her, she'd known exactly who would be underestimated and who would exploit that. The hearing was 2 weeks away. In that time, my parents stopped calling. Claire sent one last message. We didn't think you'd go this far. I typed back. You didn't think I'd go anywhere at all. No response. The night before the hearing, I packed a simple folder. Copies of documents, notes. Not to speak, just to remember. Angela had told me I likely wouldn't need to say much. Judge Alvarez preferred facts. I went to bed early. I slept deeply. Because the truth has a strange effect when you stop fighting it. It lets you rest. And when I woke up the next morning, I knew something else with complete certainty. Whatever happened in that courtroom, my family would never see me the same way again. Not because I was loud, but because I had refused to disappear. The courthouse smelled like old paper and disinfectant. I arrived 30 minutes early, not because I was nervous, but because I didn't want to rush. Rushing gives people the wrong impression. It makes them think you're reacting instead of choosing. Angela Brooks was already there, standing near the courtroom doors with a slim folder under her arm. She looked exactly the way she always did before something important. Calm, prepared, unimpressed. They're inside, she said quietly. I nodded. Through the glass, I could see them. My parents sat together on the right side of the room. Margaret Holloway's posture was perfect. Chin lifted, hands folded neatly in her lap. Thomas Holloway sat stiffly beside her, eyes fixed on the floor, like he was waiting for bad weather to pass. Claire Holloway Whitman sat one row behind them. She didn't look up. Daniel Whitman sat next to her, one hand on her knee, his expression tight and controlled. He looked like someone who still believed this could be negotiated, if the right words were used. They all looked surprised when I walked in. Not shocked. Surprised, as if part of them had still expected me not to show. Judge Maria Alvarez entered at exactly 9 a.m. No small talk, no ceremony. She took her seat and began reading from the file in front of her, without looking up. This matter concerns a petition for review of trustee conduct under the Eleanor Holloway Trust, she said. Specifically, allegations of unequal treatment, lack of disclosure, and potential interference with beneficiary autonomy. Her voice was steady, neutral. She looked up then, directly at my parents. Mr. and Mrs. Holloway, she said, you are co-trustees. You understand your obligations under the law? Yes, my father said quickly. My mother nodded. Judge Alvarez turned to Angela. Ms. Brooks, proceed. Angela didn't dramatize anything. She never did. She laid out the timeline, the amendments, the distribution structure, the difference between a one-time payout and income-generating assets. She referenced emails, messages, and language used by the trustees that indicated intent beyond neutral administration. She didn't mention feelings. She mentioned patterns. Judge Alvarez listened without interruption. Then she turned to my mother. "Mrs. Holloway," she said, "why was your younger daughter not informed of these decisions prior to finalization?" Margaret inhaled slowly. "We didn't want to burden her." Judge Alvarez tilted her head slightly. "Burden her with information about her own inheritance?" Margaret's jaw tightened. "She's always been independent." The word hung in the air. Judge Alvarez nodded once. "Independence does not remove your duty of disclosure." She turned to my father. "Mr. Holloway," she said, "did you discuss potential employment consequences with your daughter prior to contacting her workplace?" Thomas looked startled. We were concerned. "Concern is not authority," Judge Alvarez said calmly. "Did you contact her employer?" He hesitated. "Yes," he said. Claire shifted in her seat. Judge Alvarez made a note. She turned to Claire next. "Miss Holloway Whitman," she said, "you are not a trustee, yet your communications appear in trustee correspondence. Can you explain your role?" Claire looked at her hands. "I was advising, informally." "Advising whom?" Judge Alvarez asked. "My parents," Claire said. "And did your advice benefit you?" the judge asked. Silence. Daniel leaned forward slightly. "Your Honor." Judge Alvarez raised a hand. "I didn't ask you." Claire swallowed. "Yes," she said, "it did." The room felt very still. Judge Alvarez leaned back in her chair. "What I see," she said, "is a pattern of decision-making that prioritizes control over fairness. Independence has been used as a justification for exclusion. That is not acceptable." Margaret's face went pale. "This court takes fiduciary duties seriously," Judge Alvarez continued, "especially when family dynamics are used to pressure one beneficiary into silence." She looked down at her notes, then back up. "I am ordering a temporary suspension of trustee authority pending further review," she said. "A neutral fiduciary will be appointed effective immediately." Margaret gasped softly. Thomas's shoulders slumped. Claire looked up then, eyes wide, finally meeting mine. Daniel's jaw tightened. "This is not a final judgment," Judge Alvarez said, "but it is a corrective measure. The court will not allow continued administration under these circumstances." She banged the gavel once. That was it. Outside the courtroom, the temperature felt different. The hallway buzzed with quiet conversations, whispers, people pretending not to stare. My mother approached me first. "You did this to punish us," she said, voice shaking. "No," I replied calmly. "I did this to stop you." My father looked at me like he didn't recognize me anymore. "You could have talked to us." "I tried," I said. "You decided for me instead." Claire stepped closer. "You didn't have to go this far," she said. I met her eyes. "You didn't think I would." Daniel said nothing. Angela touched my arm. "Let's go." As we walked toward the exit, my phone buzzed. A text from Rosa Martinez. "You okay?" I typed back. "Yes, heading to work this afternoon." Angela glanced at me. "You don't want the day off?" "No," I said. "I want normal." She smiled slightly. "You earned it." That afternoon, I sat at my station, shaping nails, listening to the hum of the pedicure chairs, feeling the familiar rhythm return. One of my regulars, Monica Perez, looked at me over her coffee. "You look lighter," she said. "I am," I replied, because something important had happened that morning. Not the suspension. Not the shock on my family's faces. It was the moment I realized I no longer needed their approval to exist fully in my own life. They had lost control. Not because I took it, because the system they used against me finally looked back at them. And the review wasn't over yet. The court had questions, and answers were coming, whether my family was ready for them or not. Power doesn't disappear when it's taken away. It looks for another door. I felt that the week after the hearing, even before Angela Brooks confirmed it, the calls stopped, the emails stopped. My parents went quiet in a way that wasn't peace. It was regrouping. The neutral fiduciary, a man named Harold Bennett, contacted me 3 days later. Late 50s, precise. Former corporate trust officer who spoke in numbers and timelines, not apologies. "I'll be conducting a full review," he said. "I'll need access to any communications you have that weren't included in the initial accounting." "I have them," I said. "I assumed you would," he replied. We met in his office downtown the following Monday. Beige walls, no family photos, just binders. He didn't flatter me. He didn't pity me. He asked questions and wrote things down. At the end, he looked up. You were managed, he said, not represented. Yes, I replied. That's not uncommon, he added. But it is actionable. Actionable. That word carried weight. While the review moved forward, something else shifted. People who had never spoken to me directly started reaching out. A distant cousin asking how I was holding up. An old family friend suddenly liking my photos. My Aunt Susan stopped calling altogether. Reputation had changed. At work, Rosa pulled me aside with a grin. The hotel contract wants you again, she said. They specifically asked. I nodded. I can do it. The pay was generous, the hours long. I took it without hesitation. On the second day of that contract, my father showed up. I was in a private suite, working on a guest who talked the entire time about stock options and private schools. When I stepped into the hallway to sanitize tools, I saw him standing there, hands in his pockets, looking older than I remembered. Lena, Thomas said. I didn't hug him. Is this a good time? He asked. I glanced at my watch. You have 5 minutes. He nodded. I didn't think the court would move that fast. It moved when it needed to, I said. He swallowed. Your mother is devastated. I looked at him steadily. She wasn't when she cut me out. He flinched. We were trying to protect you, he said again. I tilted my head. From what? He didn't answer. I don't hate you, he said quietly. But I don't understand you anymore. I considered that. That's because you never tried to. He nodded slowly. I won't interfere anymore, he said. I promise. I believed him. That was the difference now. The review findings came back the following week. Angela called me first. It's strong, she said. Clear misuse of discretion. Documented influence. Failure to disclose. What does that mean? I asked. Permanent removal is likely, she said. Control will not be returned to them. I closed my eyes. That night, Claire emailed me. Subject line, please. The email was long, defensive at first, then softer. She wrote about pressure, about expectations, about fear of losing status, about how she never meant to hurt me. She asked if we could talk. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table again and thought about the word revenge. People imagine it as something sharp and loud. What I felt now was quieter. Relief. I replied the next morning. We can talk. Not about undoing anything. We met at a park halfway between our apartments. No coffee, no distractions. Claire looked tired, less polished, real. I didn't think you'd go through with it, she said. I know, I replied. She nodded. I thought you'd take the money and disappear. That was the plan, I said. For you. She winced. I didn't think of it that way, she said. That's the problem, I replied. She stared at the ground. What happens now? I thought for a moment. Now, I said, you learn how to stand without leaning on Mom and Dad. She laughed weakly. You make it sound simple. It's not, I said. But it's honest. We sat in silence for a while. When we stood to leave, she asked one last question. Do you hate me? I met her eyes. No, but I don't trust you. She nodded, like she expected that. The court scheduled the final hearing 2 weeks out. Permanent removal. Final rulings. At work, Jasmine Lee asked me if I was nervous. No, I said. Because nervousness comes from uncertainty. I had already passed that point. I wasn't fighting anymore. I was watching consequences unfold, and they were unfolding exactly where my family had never thought to look. In systems, in records, in rooms where names don't matter as much as facts. I went to bed that night knowing something else. This wasn't just about the trust anymore. It was about who got to define my worth. And that question had already been answered by me. The rest was just paperwork. The final hearing was scheduled for December 6th. I didn't mark it on my calendar. I didn't need to. Some dates carved themselves into you without ink. By then, the review had done its work, quietly. Harold Bennett sent formal notices. Bank access shifted. Decisions paused. The trust stopped being a family instrument and became what it should have been all along. A structure. That loss of control hit my parents harder than the court ruling ever could. My mother, Margaret, stopped attending her charity luncheons. She resigned from 2 boards, citing personal matters. People noticed. They always do when someone steps back without explanation. My father, Thomas, retired early, not announced, not celebrated, just quietly gone from the firm he'd worked at for 20 years. Stress, people said. Health, they whispered. Claire Holloway Whitman took an extended leave from work. Her social media went dark. That was the cost. Not public shame. Irrelevance. The night before the hearing, my mother called. I let it ring. She didn't leave a voicemail. Instead, she texted, "I don't recognize this family anymore." I stared at the message for a long time before replying. "You're seeing it clearly for the first time." The courtroom felt smaller the second time. Less anticipation. More finality. Judge Maria Alvarez reviewed the fiduciary report aloud. Her tone never changed. That neutrality was devastating in its own way. She referenced specific emails, specific phrases, specific decisions. She didn't look at me when she spoke. She didn't need to. "This court finds a sustained pattern of discretionary abuse," she said. "Trustee authority will be permanently removed." Margaret closed her eyes. Thomas stared straight ahead. Claire didn't move. "A professional fiduciary will assume long-term administration," Judge Alvarez continued. "Distribution structures will be rebalanced according to original intent." Original intent. That phrase landed softly. The gavel came down once. It was over. Outside the courtroom, no one raised their voice. My parents didn't approach me. Claire stood frozen for a moment, then walked past without looking up. Daniel Whitman followed behind her, already on his phone, already recalculating. Angela Brooks shook my hand. "You were patient," she said. That made the difference. I nodded. "Thank you." "You won't need me anymore," she added. "I know," I said. That afternoon, I went back to work. It surprised people when they heard. They expected celebration, a break, time off. What they didn't understand was that Bellissima Nails had never been my fallback. It was my foundation. Rosa hugged me when I came in. "Whatever happened," she said, "you look like you won something." "I got something back," I replied. Over the next week, the redistribution finalized. I didn't suddenly become wealthy. That wasn't the point. What changed was leverage. Income-producing assets were restructured. My role wasn't ceremonial anymore. I had visibility, consultation rights, respect written into documents that didn't care about tone or favoritism. My grandmother Eleanor's wishes were honored. Quietly, I received a letter from the fiduciary outlining everything in clear language. No emotional padding. No family interpretation, just facts. That night, I sat alone in my apartment and opened the drawer where I'd kept the original check stub. I looked at the number again. Then I folded the paper and threw it away. A week later, Claire emailed me. Just one line. "I'm moving to Denver," I replied. "I hope you find what you're looking for." She didn't answer. My mother didn't contact me again. Not to apologize. Not to argue. Sometimes, silence is the closest thing to acceptance people are capable of. At the salon, Jasmine asked me one afternoon if it felt good to win. I thought about it. "This wasn't a competition," I said. "It was a correction." She smiled like she understood. Around Christmas, I received a card from my Aunt Susan. No note, just a generic message about family and forgiveness. I recycled it. On Christmas Day, I worked a half shift. The tips were generous. The conversations light. No one asked me about family. That was the gift. That night, alone in my apartment, I cooked dinner for one and ate it slowly. I thought about the years I'd spent believing my value was conditional, that my usefulness defined my place, that being quiet was the price of belonging. I thought about how easily that belief had been enforced, not through cruelty, through politeness, through concern, through phrases like independence and optics and what's best for you, the kind of language that sounds reasonable until you realize it's never applied evenly. The final lesson didn't come from the courtroom. It came from watching my family adapt to a world where I no longer filled the role they assigned me. They didn't rage, they didn't beg, they recalculated. And that told me everything. I wasn't the problem. I never had been. I was simply inconvenient to a system that required me to stay small. Now, that system no longer had access to me, and that was the most honest resolution I could have asked for. The quiet after everything settled felt unfamiliar, not empty, just unclaimed. For weeks, no one from my family reached out. No updates passed through cousins, no indirect messages disguised as concern. It was like a door had closed, and everyone on the other side agreed not to knock. I didn't chase the silence. I learned how to live inside it. Work stayed steady. The hotel contracts became regular. Rosa officially promoted me to lead tech and training coordinator in January, with a written agreement this time. Clear responsibilities, clear compensation, no vague promises. $88,000 a year before tips. That number mattered, not because it was impressive, because it was earned without anyone's approval. One afternoon, while training a new hire, I realized something quietly significant. No one here compared me to anyone else, not to a sister, not to an expectation, not to a version of success that didn't fit my hands. Clients started requesting me weeks out again. One woman, a corporate attorney named Melissa Grant, watched me work in silence for most of her appointment. "You know," she said finally, "you run this station like a business." I smiled. "It is one." She nodded. "If you ever want to consult on operations for multi-location salons, let me know." I took her card. That night, I wrote a list. Not goals, boundaries. What I would no longer tolerate. What I would no longer explain. What I would never again negotiate. At the top of the list was one line. I do not earn my place by shrinking. In February, my father Thomas called. I almost didn't answer, but I did. "Lena," he said. His voice sounded thinner, older. "I wanted to tell you I'm stepping back from a lot of things." "I heard," I said. "I'm trying to understand where I went wrong," he said. I leaned against my kitchen counter. "That's not a conversation you get to have with me yet." He was quiet for a moment. "I know. I don't need apologies," I said. "I need consistency." "I don't know if I can give you that," he admitted. "Then we're done for now," I said gently. He didn't argue. That was progress. A month later, my mother Margaret sent an email. Not about the trust. Not about family. About her health. She wrote as if we were acquaintances. Polite, distant, controlled. I replied with one sentence. "I hope you're taking care of yourself." Nothing more. Nothing less. Claire didn't contact me again, but I heard things. Through Rachel. Through friends of friends. Denver hadn't been the reset she expected. Her job hadn't transferred. Daniel was traveling more. She was learning what it meant to be unremarkable. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt recognition. Because for the first time, she was living without a script written for her. That spring, the fiduciary sent a final summary. The trust was stable, transparent, boring. That was exactly how it should be. I printed the last page and placed it in a folder labeled closed. Then I put the folder in a drawer I rarely opened. One evening, after a long day, I sat on my balcony watching the city lights flicker on. I thought about how close I'd come to taking the check and disappearing. How easy it would have been to tell myself it wasn't worth the trouble. How often women like me are taught that endurance is maturity, that silence is grace, that being grateful means accepting whatever is handed to you. I understood now why that belief had survived so long. It keeps systems comfortable, but comfort isn't the same as fairness, and peace isn't the same as permission. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at my parents, not at Claire. Not even at the version of myself that stayed quiet for too long. She did what she needed to survive. I did what I needed to change the ending. The last realization came quietly, the way the most important ones do. Revenge wasn't what I'd done. Revenge implies obsession. This was separation. I had removed myself from a structure that required me to be less than I was. And in doing so, I hadn't destroyed anything. I had simply stopped participating. That was the power they never accounted for. Because you can't control someone who no longer needs your approval. And once that clicks, everything else rearranges itself. There was only one chapter left. Not in court, not in family, but in what I chose to build next. The last confrontation didn't happen in a courtroom. It didn't happen over a dinner table either. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday morning, 3 months later, when my phone buzzed while I was sanitizing my station. The name on the screen was Claire Mitchell, my sister. I stared at it for a full 10 seconds before answering. "Hi," I said. Her voice came out cautious. "Hey, Lena, do you have a minute?" "I have 5, I said, honest and unsoftened. There was a pause, then a breath. I'm in town. I already knew. Rachel had mentioned it casually, like weather. But hearing it directly still tightened something low in my chest. For Mom's follow-up appointment, Claire continued. I thought maybe we could talk. Just clear the air. I wiped my tools slowly. Where? There's a cafe on 5th. Tomorrow morning? I work mornings, I said. Late afternoon. Another pause. Then, okay. We met at 4:30. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just less arranged. Her coat wrinkled, hair pulled back without intention. No performance. We ordered separately. She watched me while I stirred my tea. I let her. You look different, she said finally. So do you, I replied. She smiled weakly. I deserved that. I didn't respond. Claire folded her hands together, then unfolded them. I wanted to say, I didn't think it would go like that. I raised an eyebrow. Like what? Like losing control, she admitted. Of the narrative. Of them. I nodded. That tends to happen when the truth shows up, she swallowed. I didn't mean to hurt you. I met her eyes. Intent doesn't erase impact. She nodded again, slower this time. I know. Silence settled between us. Not tense, just clear. I'm not asking to go back to how things were, Claire said. I don't think that's possible. No, I agreed. It isn't. I just wanted to acknowledge that you weren't wrong, she said quietly. About any of it. That was new. Not an apology, but recognition. I let it sit. I don't hate you, I said after a moment. But I won't shrink again so you can feel tall. Her eyes glistened. She didn't cry. I wouldn't ask you to, she said. We finished our drinks. We stood. There was no hug, just a mutual understanding of distance. That was enough. The real ending came weeks later. I signed papers for my own LLC on a Wednesday afternoon between appointments. Lena Alvarez Nail Consulting and Operations. The name felt solid. I didn't announce it. I didn't post. I just built. By summer, I was consulting for 3 independent salons and 2 hotel spas, helping them structure scheduling systems, pricing tiers, sanitation compliance, training nail techs to understand their value and protect their hands, their time, their income. I was still a nail tech. I never stopped being proud of that. I just expanded the room. One afternoon, a younger tech named Brianna asked me how I knew so much about contracts. I smiled. Experience. She hesitated. My family says this isn't a real career. I looked at her hands. Calloused, steady, skilled. Neither is pleasing people who don't pay your bills, I said. She laughed, then nodded. That mattered more than any settlement. On my 31st birthday, I spent the day alone. No parties, no forced smiles. I took myself to a quiet restaurant and ordered exactly what I wanted. When the server asked if anyone was joining me, I said no, and meant it. Without apology. That night, I thought about everything that had changed. I wasn't richer than my sister. I wasn't louder than my parents. I wasn't more impressive on paper. But I owned myself. And that was the asset they never expected me to claim. Family drama teaches you strange lessons. It teaches you how easily love becomes conditional, how success gets weaponized, how silence is praised when it's convenient for others. But it also teaches you something sharper, that boundaries aren't punishments, they're definitions. And the moment you define yourself, the entire system has to recalibrate. I didn't win by destroying anyone. I won by refusing to stay where I was diminished. That's not revenge. That's self-respect with teeth. If you stayed with this story until the end, thank you. If you saw yourself in any part of it, you're not alone. And if you're standing at the edge of a choice between keeping the peace and keeping yourself, choose yourself. Every time. If this story resonated with you, like it, share it, and subscribe for more real-life family drama stories about karma, boundaries, and tables turning when you least expect it. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I read them.